Hi, welcome everyone. I am Ivy Slater and welcome to today's Slater Success Live. First, let me start off by wishing everybody a happy, healthy, and prosperous 2023. For those of you who've been following us for a while, welcome back. And for those of you who are new viewers, thank you for checking in and joining us today. Just so you know, we did a series from Thanksgiving through New Year's on nonprofits and organizations that make an impact. And we are continuing with our very, very last interview today, and you have something special in store for you. Let me reassure you of that. I was completely impressed when I was connected to Jocelyn Mangan. Jocelyn is the founder and CEO of an organization called Him for Her. It's a social enterprise with an aim to change nonprofit boards of directors to include the world's most talented women. So you know, for those of you who know me, know how important this is to me, and how great this is that we have women spearheading women out there. She has built a platform where female candidates are more visible and have more board opportunities. Jocelyn is a woman who is involved in many things. She serves as the Insights Council member with the NASDAQ Center for Board Excellence in shaping its strategy, contributing with insights, and working with other council members to identify and address important board governance matters. More importantly than that, you don't need to hear me talk about Jocelyn. We want to talk to Jocelyn. Thank you for joining me, and happy, healthy New Year to you.
Yes, happy New Year to you too, and thanks for having me today.
So viewers, if you're new to us, feel free to put some questions or comments in the chat. For those of you who are scrolling through LinkedIn or Facebook, Jocelyn and I are going to always be coming back and seeing your comments as you tag us, so we will continue the conversation after today. So I have to ask, where the concept and why Him for Her, how did this get started for you?
So I got started, I have a long career in technology. That's been my background. And in 2016, I was invited into a fellowship out of the Aspen Institute called the Henry Crown Fellowship. And this fellowship is really brings leaders together for a 2-year program. And part of that program is that each of us starts a venture that we think will be world changing or game changing.
Love it.
And so that's where it was born. And it was born really out of my passion for women at work, which, as we all know, many on the call today and you, it's a big category, right? There's a lot of things to focus on and to do. And actually, I chose the boardroom because I knew from my lived experience that it's the most important room in business. I was fortunate enough to be invited into the boardroom when I was 28 years old to pitch an idea that sent me to London and changed my life. So I've seen it firsthand. And, you know, I'm a product manager. That's my discipline. And so I looked at the data and I saw, wow, it's largely occupied by men. And so I went and interviewed 90 different men in the boardroom to figure out a little bit more about the space and how do they think. And
first, I'm going to jump in right there because I'm a huge data freak.
Yeah.
I'm a huge market research and data freak. And I do, thanks to Vincent for the shout out of joining us here on LinkedIn Live today. But I love that you interviewed 90 men in the boardroom, because that all of a sudden is hardcore information to build something forward. So I didn't want to interrupt you, but huge kudos to you. And I love that you did that.
Yeah, and we've done some subsequent research as well that I'll mention, just because when we started looking at more and more data, we couldn't find it because there's a lot of data out there on the public company board landscape because it's public information. But what many people don't realize is that the bulk of our companies and, you know, our future companies, our future innovation, they're all private companies. Yeah. So we were also interested in, well, what does that board landscape look like? And we have a study, which I'll share the results shortly, and it's about to come out with its new version this year. But so what I learned from my interviews was 2 things that I think are really important. And one is that everyone I talked to wanted to help. They were just really looking for ways of how. And the second thing I learned is when I asked them how they found their last board member, I just got a personal network story. So the big aha was, there's no pipeline issue. It's a network problem. And we just need to close this network gap. So that's what we do as an organization.
And that's so true. I mean, we refer people to boards, right? You ask your board members, oh, somebody's stepping down, or we want to increase, who do you know? And people pull from the people they know. And if you are, in general, more male dominated than female dominated, you pull from your network. It's nothing wrong with that. It's just now it's time to start balancing that.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, we didn't set out necessarily to change that behavior. That's really hard to do, but we just wanted to make sure different people were in those conversations. And so that's what we're really doing at scale is we're making sure more people are in those personal networks of board opportunities.
So there's always the concept of the idea, and then it's building the idea into our organization. How did the idea go to the organization is always my curiosity.
Yeah, I think, I have to give credit to my two co-founders, Ann Shepard and Fiona Tang, both of whom joined me very early. And we're all operators. We're all from high growth tech companies. And I think we took kind of that growth mindset to what is really a systemic opportunity, right? We call it systemic innovation. It's like you have to be equally patient and impatient with this because we're talking about changing something that's been around for centuries, and yet we want to do it quickly. So I'd say, a lot of it was understanding our audience and using data and making sure that we were moving as quickly as possible in, quite frankly, a space that doesn't move very quickly.
So how do you create years of a culture? Okay. And I love that you're acknowledging and you're saying, we knew we had centuries, right? Of this is the way it's done. And now we wanted to create rapid growth and rapid change. What is some of the first things you did? Because I mean, that's very often where people get caught up. It's like, yeah, it sounds great in concept. How do you do it?
Well, the funny thing is the first thing we did was so simple. We hosted, because when I did all those interviews, and people said how they met their last board member, several of them were like, well, I was at a private dinner with so-and-so or so-and-so. And I was like, wow, that sounds amazing. Why don't we just host a private dinner and invite different people? And so that's what we did. We had, I was introduced to Scott Cook, who's the founder of Intuit. He hosted our very first dinner. And I'll never forget how thoughtful he was and how thoughtful we were about that dinner. So we made sure that it was a gender equal table. We made sure that it wasn't a situation where someone was talking at a table full of people, but that everybody contributed as peers. We capped it at 20 people. And it was funny because he called me, he said, we have a problem. There's too many people that want to come. We were going to have to host a second one. And that's when I knew we were onto something. And we ended the year, we're at like 130 of these that we've done. And we do them both remote and in person. And they follow a really specific formula, and yet they are very meaningful conversations. We really call them, they're not always a dinner. Sometimes they are remote. So they're really kind of executive roundtables, so to speak. And they always have an iconic host. And that's what draws people to come. It's always off the record so people can just speak freely about the boardroom and about leadership and about current thinking and current topics. And it's amazing that human connection, right, has really built relationships. And it's relationships that we're facilitating that lead to those board seats, because, it isn't a role that people tend to just hire someone off our resume, so to speak. They want to get to know this person. This is a big job. It's a big time commitment. And so that's why, if you really think about it, we're helping to facilitate new entrants into these conversations and relationships at scale.
So how do you find people to invite to dinner? Like, are there people that are in you're in your partner's networks? Are there people, are you always looking to expand that? What's your methodology behind that?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you think about this landscape, it has two parts to it, right? There's the people who want to be on the boards and the people who hold the board seats. And so we spend a lot of time in both of those audiences. And so for those people who want to be on board seats, typically they're just nominated from someone who knows them. And, we have over 6,000 women in our network, and over a third of those are women of color. And those have all come to us organically. And I think you mentioned this before, we're nonprofits, so we're not charging the women. But the other side of the equation is equally important, which is the opportunities themselves. And those are held really with three types of personas, either the investors, the CEOs of the companies, or the sitting board members. And so the way that we tap into the opportunities, which is critical, because one thing to build all these candidates, but if you don't have the opportunities, that can feel like a closed door. But what we do is we partner with private equity and venture capital firms. And we have we're approaching, I think, 90 of those now and growing.
Wow.
And that's important because those people hold the keys to all the private companies who are looking for board members. And unless you know them or you know those companies, how else would you find those? We also find the board opportunities just through our network, through our hosts, through the people who've nominated other people. And so we've mostly grown word of mouth, to be honest.
And I love the holistic, organic, whatever word you want to use, approach. I for the LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube followers who have followed me at all know I'm a core believer. I've written books about. I have lived my life on the greatest business is done is based on building relationships. And that's when I hear you saying, well, this is what you're doing with him for her. And I also love, and I have to tell you, Jocelyn, I love the fact that it is him for her, that it's men and women supporting for a common goal. It's not segregated here. It's together that we make a difference.
Yeah, and it has to be, because if you just look at the data, and I mentioned this earlier, our private companies study, which studied the most highly funded venture-backed companies in the US, private, 40% of those boards are still all male.
Yeah.
Only 3% have a woman of color. And so, you really can't make progress without partnering with those people who actually hold the seats and the keys to opening the doors to future seats. And so that was always clear to us, that partnership was critical to progress.
What has surprised you in building this?
What surprised me was how much progress we made quickly. Because if I'm honest, this was a project out of a fellowship. It was something that I thought would stay a project out of a fellowship. And, at some point I realized the magnitude of not only the progress we were making, but the change that the continued progress would make for really a better society, because these boardrooms are sitting above the CEOs. And I believe, two of the biggest levers for change are the public and the private sector. And all you have to do is open the paper to see how much influence companies have on our lives today. And so, really what surprised me was how important this work really is, and that putting it down just no longer was an option for me.
So I have so many questions to ask you. I have to tell you, my mind's going, forget whatever I wrote down in preparation. That's already out the window. So in truly, how do you scale this? I mean, there's so many companies out there. It seems that this is, we always look at companies like, what's the scalability of an organization, especially when you're looking at venture capital and PE, and, when you now take a step back as the founder and the leader of this, what's the scalability of this?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is, I had a friend who asked me in the spring, you're making a lot of progress. What would it take to solve the problem? And what's amazing about this is we can solve it. You can map it. There's about 14,000 companies that need their boardrooms to shift. So just imagine 14,000 tables. And we say we solve it when there's 2 women on private boards and 3 on every public. Mm-hmm. So it's a solvable problem. That's the first thing.
And I love the numbers behind that. 2 women on every private board and 3 women on every public board. I love that you have metrics and numbers behind that. Brilliant.
Yeah. And the reason we say that is because that's kind of when you stop talking about it, right? It's solved when it is no longer an issue. It's an issue when there's no women. And it's an issue when there's only 1 woman. But when there starts to be 2 on those smaller private boards, 3 on the larger public, then it really becomes a non-conversation piece, because the women are already there and they're growing, right? They're referring others. So that's our goal. So I think the first thing was, what's the goal? And let's put a stake in the ground. So our goal is to solve it in 10 years in the United States. And so then your next question is, how do you scale it? Well, it requires scaling supply and scaling demand. And so our team is busy at work. We're no surprise, no shortage of women are getting referred to us, but that doesn't mean we know all the women. We need to know all the women, right? And then also all the opportunities. And the way that we're scaling the access to those opportunities is continued partnership with the investment community at large, continued partnership with U.S. corporations. And so that does take, to your point, building relationship at scale with all those different constituents. And so that's what we're setting out to do.
So on a business side of this, right, you have your organization, which has 3 or more people in it, right? You have 6,000 women in your database who are ready for board positions. You have, how many tables did you run this past year?
Well, since we started,
we started,
call it 130 executive roundtables. Yeah.
130 executive roundtables. What's on the agenda for 2023? Are we there?
We're there. Thankfully, our team is very organized, and so we know what we're focused on in 2023. And what's exciting is that, we went from an all in-person organization to an all remote organization to now what we've discovered is an effective hybrid, right? Because if we were only doing dinners, for example, we'd really miss out on opportunities to meet people in geographies where we weren't on the ground, right? So if you look at 2023, what's our focus? It really is doubling down on those partnerships so that those opportunities are keeping pace with all the great women who are entering our network. It's continuing to meet those great women and that are ready today to serve on boards, and continuing to build the referrals for those board openings. So that's something we didn't talk about, but we build curated referrals for board openings for free. And so that's really important for people out there who have board openings to know. And so we're just doing more of that, getting smarter at our efficiency at doing that, and finding more of those opportunities. And that's what's really going to change the numbers towards that goal that we talked about.
And so how does, in a nonprofit, usually you have, well, let's talk about funds, because we all have to eat. We all have technology for, of how are we hosting these things, right? The companies have to run, including nonprofits or organizations. And it's very often when we look at a for-profit organization, it's a sales transaction. You sell to somebody, it comes back to you, right? You receive revenue. Him for Her as an organization, how can the organization, the people, right, are jumping at the opportunity? Okay, you're clearly making an impact in through private equity and venture capital of working and getting into and getting the boards better balanced with that goal of 2 to 3. But how does Him for Her sustain itself? Where is your capital coming from, and how does that working? If I'm not overstepping my bounds, if you're open to share that.
No, it's a super question, because what's interesting is when you really get into the world of business, most smart donors want to see an earned revenue strategy in a nonprofit, and most smart investors want to see a strong revenue model in a for-profit. So in some ways, the expectations of your audiences are similar. And, the 2 co-founders and I, we come from a for-profit background. So I think we always started this business with a for-profit mindset, but understanding that it's the earned revenue strategy that's going to keep us sustained. And if we're not sustained, we can't make progress. So we have both strategies. Obviously, we have some amazing donors, like people who give us donations. They believe in our work, and it was the end of the year. We just had some really nice donations come in. But it's really important too that we maintain our earned revenue strategy. And the way that works today is when we partner with venture capital and private equity firms, They give us a donation in honor of our ability to support their work and diversity. Also, when we place someone on a board, that company makes an optional donation in honor of the woman that we place. So we have a strong earned revenue strategy. We aim to be self-sustained as an organization, which I think is important for every nonprofit to have a model and to have goals. And so we've made a lot of progress there, and we're proud of that model.
I love that. I love a sustained revenue model within a nonprofit. I think it's rare. I'm truly myself learning more and more about them. And I think it's fabulous. And it's also a buy-in on a mission. It's a buy-in to make a difference.
Yeah. And I think, we're here to solve a major opportunity in our country that I think will have profound impacts. And so if we don't look out for our financials, we can't make that progress. And that comes both ways, right? We don't want to wait 30 years for progress. So we do need philanthropic capital to accelerate our growth. And yet, to attract the right donors, we also have to prove that we're making progress and that we are on a path to sustainability, right? So that we're not spending all of our time fundraising and not enough time making progress.
Yeah. So in having a more balanced board, okay, there's so much written about this. There's so much in so many areas. Have there been boards you've made an impact on, boards that you've helped balance, that have come back to you and say, Jocelyn, or him for her, this is what we see?
All the time. I mean, thousands of stories. And honestly, that's one of our goals in 2023 is to bring some of these stories to life. We're grateful that we get to hear about them, and they're in our inboxes, and they're coming from the CEOs, they're coming from the investors, there's one in my inbox this morning from a woman who just said, wow, like you've really helped introduce me to some amazing opportunities. So yes, we hear the stories about from the whole gamut, from thank you for introducing me to opportunities, but also now that we've been at this for a few years, we have a look back, right? So these CEOs being like, oh my gosh, this board is completely different because of this woman, or these two women, quite frankly. Some boards we've introduced multiple women to, and the board looks completely different. The CEOs are so grateful. The conversations are different. The employees are engaged because they have this new board member that they can see that's an example of something they may want to be. The customers and consumers who may not look to the boards every day, but they're also benefiting. So yes, we sit on the stories, and there's lots of them out there. Of course, there's data studies too, but I often think that it's hearing from those CEOs themselves that's almost the most powerful.
Well, when you put a reel together with those stories, you have my cell number. I truly want to watch it, truly from my heart, my heart of hearts, because it is such important work you're doing.
Well, we do have our 2022 impact report came out at the end of the year, and that includes a nice video with some of these stories. It's not all of them, but it's a nice collection of not only the stories, but some of the progress, some of the names of the hosts and partners who support us. And so I will share that with you and anyone on this who wants it. It's out there, and we're very proud of it. It's on our website.
So I was going to ask you, okay, so now that we've talked about stories, let's talk about the data. So can you share a little bit about, the metrics and the data on the results of as these board shifts and shifts to a more balanced board with 2 to 3 women on it, depending public or private sector?
Yeah, I mean, we keep an Airtable database of all the articles that prove that the company is better. And I think there's over 100 articles. Wow. So, it's better. And it really, if you just take yourself even out of the data and you just think about a conversation about a problem, right? Or a conversation about opportunity, either way. And if you have a conversation with a bunch of people who have a similar background and who think alike, that's groupthink. And if you really are in the spirit of growth and innovation, which most companies want to be, you must have different questions and perspectives at the table when it comes to these hard and strategic topics. And so the studies really just validate what I just said, right? And they validate it from a financial lens, yes, companies with diverse boards perform better. But there's also other elements, right? There's elements of being better for the environment, being better at risk assessment. And it goes on and on and on, right? And so I think that's what people should really think about. And I think the other thing is what boards are talking about now is hard. The global environment is tough to operate in. The financial environment is tough to operate in. The cultural environment is challenging. And so it's good and important to have people at the top of that company who are asking the right questions around what are becoming very hard operating environments for CEOs and for boards.
And, in the last few years, when we've had some challenging and unusual times, to have a board with different perspectives has been so important to organizations.
Exactly. And no one's really predicting that it's going to get easier, right? So, and I think now it's two things. It's setting an intention of what you just said is true. Like, look, it's important that we have a diverse board. Let's say it out loud. Let's make a point of fixing or solving. But the second is really taking the action to make it happen. And I think what we try to do as an organization to make that as easy as possible, as frictionless, as free, right? We know the talent's there. We have the talent. So
you have the talent.
Just reach out and let us help you find those people.
So as we close today, and I said, Jocelyn, we have viewers all different platforms watching this video. It's going to continue to get posted and people will share. What is one action or one piece of curiosity? If you're part of a company, if you're part of a board, what's that one piece, even before the action, the piece of curiosity that drives people to motion or into action?
I would say, I think about our landscape as two-sided, right? So the people who have the ability to put people on their own board and the people who want to sit on a board. And I'll start with those who want to sit on a board. And the curiosity should be, what is it about that you want that makes it interesting to you? Mm-hmm. And if it's something that you feel you're already ready to do, there's really great steps to take to get there. And if you are someone who looks at their own board and says, you know what, I was listening to this and we really could use, some different board members. The action or the curiosity is really how do I find those people, right? And then obviously I'm going to say the action is reach out to us, but really I think that's the curiosity is where and how can I find a way to look outside my own network? That's key.
I love that. And viewers, as you're scrolling through various platforms and you come on this interview, give it a few minutes to listen, ask questions. Make a comment. Let us know what is resonating about today's conversation. This has been, I will, I'm like the most open person around. I'll say, Jocelyn was supposed to come on in December and we really wanted to push that and not allow this interview to be lost later in the holidays. As the holidays got closer and people got busy, we wanted people to really know about him for her and kick this off in the new year with understanding the importance and what's possible as we balance more boards, and that it moves forward into our 2023 mission of having more equality and thoughtfulness around scaling and growing businesses. Jocelyn, how can our viewers, listeners reach out to you, connect with you?
So we are at hemforher.org. And you'll see a way for all the people I just talked about. If you're interested in sitting on a board yourself, or if you're interested in getting a list of candidates for your own board, very simple. You'll find me on LinkedIn. That's where we are now. That's where I am as well. So appreciate you for hosting this conversation. I agree. For what a perfect time of year. And I'm honored to be here and honored to have you spotlight the work that we're doing.
I'm thrilled. And, viewers, again, stay tuned. Jocelyn, I'm going to tell you to hang out in the green room for a minute as I close this up. We have some great things coming up in 2023. People that we've never interviewed before, as well as some people that have possibly been on Her Success Story that have never been on Slater Success Live. If you have a heart or an interest in nonprofits, please go check out Her Success Story for the nonprofit series that we just completed, and some great new interviews coming forward in 2023. And leave a comment. Let me know always what was most helpful in listening today. That's where we build these platforms from. That's where we build the interviews, whether they're audio or video, in serving you as listeners. So thank you for joining me here today. Stay tuned for more great LinkedIn Live shows coming up this year in 2023. Wishing you all a happy, healthy, abundant year filled with all good things coming your way. See you next time.